My name is Luke Carter, and if you'd asked me 3 years ago whether a single dance could change the course of someone's life, I would have laughed in your face. Not because I didn't believe in love. I just didn't believe things like that happened to people like me. Back then, I was 35 years old, working as a project coordinator for a construction company in Chicago. My life wasn't bad. It was just predictable. Wake up, go to work, come home, order takeout, watch something on Netflix, repeat. Most of my coworkers were married, engaged, or constantly talking about their dating lives. I was the guy who quietly listened and changed the subject whenever someone asked if I was seeing anyone. The truth? I hadn't been on a real date in almost 2 years. Not because I hated dating. I was just tired. Tired of awkward conversations. Tired of pretending to be someone more interesting than I actually was. And tired of feeling like every first date was a job interview where nobody got hired. So when our company announced its annual holiday party, I planned to do what I always did. Show up, stay for an hour, smile at a few people, then disappear before anyone noticed. Unfortunately, my best friend at work had other plans. His name was Ethan, the kind of guy who could start a conversation with a brick wall and somehow leave with its phone number. The moment I walked into the hotel ballroom, he spotted me. "There he is," he said, pointing dramatically across the room. I already knew that look. It meant trouble. "Luke, tonight is the night." "The night for what?" "The night you stop acting like a retired 80-year-old. I rolled my eyes. "Good to see you too." The party was already in full swing. Music filled the room. People were laughing. Groups of coworkers stood around tall cocktail tables holding drinks. And then I noticed her. Not because she was trying to get attention. Actually, it was the opposite. Alyssa Cooper was standing near the far side of the room talking to two friends. She was smiling at something one of them said. For a second, I caught myself staring. Not in a creepy way. Just long enough to realize she looked different outside the office. At work, Alyssa always seemed confident, professional, untouchable. Tonight she looked normal, relaxed, human. Before I could look away, Ethan followed my gaze. A grin immediately spread across his face. "Oh no. What?" "Oh yes. I already knew where this was going. And I wanted absolutely no part of it." I turned back toward the bar and hoped the conversation would die there. Didn't. Ethan grabbed a drink and leaned closer. "You know she's single, right?" "I know absolutely nothing about her." "Exactly my point." I sighed. "Alyssa works 2 floors above us. I've talked to her maybe 3 times. 4. "What? You've talked to her 4 times. I stared at him. The fact that he knew that was honestly concerning. Before I could answer, someone called his name from across the room. For one beautiful moment, I thought I'd been saved. I was wrong. As he walked away, he pointed directly at me, then pointed toward Alyssa, then gave a thumbs up, like some kind of idiot. I wanted to disappear. A few minutes later, I found an empty table near the edge of the ballroom. Far enough from the crowd. Close enough not to seem antisocial. Perfect. I spent the next 20 minutes talking to a guy from accounting about football. Honestly, I was having a good time. Then the music changed. The DJ switched from upbeat dance music to something slower. Couples started moving toward the dance floor. I didn't pay much attention until I heard laughter. Not the normal kind. The kind that makes you instinctively look over. Alyssa and her 2 friends were standing nearby. One of them whispered something. Another immediately started laughing. Then both women looked directly at me. My stomach sank. I knew that look. Every guy knows that look. Someone had an idea. And somehow I was involved. Alyssa shook her head. Her friends kept talking. One of them lightly pushed her shoulder. She laughed again. Then she looked at me. Actually looked at me. For several seconds. I remember thinking, "Please don't come over here. Please don't come over here. Please don't come over here." She started walking. Straight toward my table. I considered pretending to answer a phone call. Too late. I considered going to the restroom. Also too late. By the time I'd finished panicking, she was standing right in front of me. "Hi, Luke." Her smile was friendly, but there was something nervous about it, which surprised me. I'd never imagined Alyssa Cooper being nervous about anything. "Hey." For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she glanced back toward her friends. Both of them were watching, trying very hard to pretend they weren't watching. Alyssa rolled her eyes, then looked back at me. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." A small laugh escaped her, the kind people make when they're embarrassed before they've even said anything. Then she took a breath and asked the question that changed everything. "Would you like to dance?" I blinked. Once, twice, certain I'd misheard her. "Sorry." She laughed again. "See? That's exactly why they dared me." Now I was confused. "Dared you?" Alyssa covered her face for a second. "Oh my God. This is so embarrassing." For the first time all evening, she didn't look like the confident woman everyone at work seemed to know. She looked completely human. "My friends bet me $20 that I wouldn't come over and ask you." I looked past her. Both women were trying not to laugh. One of them was already holding up a $20 bill. I couldn't help smiling, because somehow the entire situation was ridiculous and strangely honest. Alyssa pointed toward the door. "If you say no, I'm moving to another state." I laughed. A real laugh. The first one I'd had all night. Then I stood up. "Well, we can't let that happen." The relief on her face was immediate, and a few seconds later we were walking toward the dance floor together. Neither of us had any idea that one stupid $20 dare was about to become the most important moment of our lives. The dance floor wasn't crowded. Most people were still standing around talking, drinking, or pretending not to gossip about their coworkers. Unfortunately, Ethan was doing none of those things. He was openly staring. The moment he saw Alyssa and me walking toward the dance floor together, his jaw practically hit the floor. I made eye contact with him. He pointed at me, then at Alyssa, then at himself, as if asking, "What is happening?" I shrugged. I had no idea either. Alyssa noticed. "Friend of yours. The biggest problem in my life." She laughed. The sound was warm, natural, not the polite office laugh people use during meetings. The song had already started by the time we reached the center of the room. Neither of us seemed to know who should move first. For a second we just stood there awkwardly. Then Alyssa smiled. "You know, for someone who got asked to dance as a joke, you're surprisingly calm." "I've been panicking internally for the last 3 minutes." That made her laugh again. "Good. I was worried I was the only one." I looked at her. "You?" "Absolutely." She lowered her voice. "I haven't done anything this embarrassing in years." The music played softly around us. Without really thinking about it, I placed my hand near her waist. She rested hers on my shoulder, and suddenly the awkwardness started disappearing. Not all at once, just little by little. The strange thing wasn't that we were dancing. The strange thing was how easy it felt to talk to her. At work, Alyssa always seemed surrounded by people. Confident, popular. The kind of woman who probably had plans every weekend and 20 unread text messages at all times. But standing there, she seemed completely different. "I have a confession." "That sounds dangerous." "It probably is." She looked away for a second. "My friends didn't actually dare me because they thought you'd say no." Now I was curious. "Then why?" Alyssa groaned. "Because apparently they think I've had a crush on you for months." For a moment I genuinely thought I'd misheard her. The music, the crowd, everything around me seemed to disappear. "What?" Alyssa immediately covered her face. "Oh wow." Saying it out loud somehow made it worse. I couldn't stop staring at her. Alyssa Cooper, the woman half the office seemed intimidated by, the woman everyone noticed when she walked into a room, was standing in front of me looking embarrassed, because her friends thought she liked me. "Your turn." "My turn. You have to confess something now." I laughed nervously. "That's not how this works." "It absolutely is." The smile on her face made it impossible to argue. I looked down for a second, then back at her. "Okay." She waited, and suddenly I felt like I was back in high school. "My confession is..." I paused, immediately regretting it, but somehow continuing anyway. "I've noticed you every day since my first week at the company." For a second neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Then Alyssa blinked and smiled. Not the playful smile from before. Not the confident smile she used with everyone else. Something softer. Something real. And that's when I realized this wasn't a joke anymore. Not for her. And definitely not for me. The song ended a minute later. Neither of us seemed eager to step away. That should have been my first clue. Normally, when a slow dance ends, people smile politely and return to their friends. That's what I expected. Instead, Alyssa looked around the room and asked, "Do you want another drink?" I knew exactly what she was doing. She was giving us an excuse not to say goodbye yet. And honestly, I was grateful. Sure. We left the dance floor together. As we walked back toward the bar, I noticed her friends staring. One of them looked absolutely stunned. The other was laughing so hard she nearly spilled her drink. Alyssa pointed at them. "See what you've done? What I've done. They're never going to let me forget this. To be fair, you're the one who walked over. Because of $20. I reached into my pocket. "How much do you need?" She burst out laughing. For some reason, hearing her laugh was becoming my favorite part of the evening. The bartender handed us our drinks. We found a quieter corner near a large window overlooking downtown Chicago. The city lights stretched across the darkness. Cars moved through the streets below. Inside, the music continued, but somehow it felt farther away now, like we'd stepped into our own little world. The conversation became easier, then easier still. We talked about work, then movies, then travel, then childhood memories. One topic somehow led to another. Hours seemed to disappear. At one point, Alyssa looked at her phone. Her eyes widened. "Oh no. What? It's almost midnight." I checked mine. She was right. The party had started hours ago. Felt like maybe 30 minutes. That's probably a good sign. Or a terrible sign. I smiled. Why terrible? Because now I'm going to spend the whole weekend wondering if I imagined this. There was that nervous smile again. The one I never saw in the office. The one that made her feel real. For a second, neither of us said anything. The noise from the party faded into the background. And then something happened that caught me completely off guard. Alyssa reached into her purse, pulled out a pen, grabbed a cocktail napkin from the table, and wrote something down. She folded it once, then slid it across to me. My heart immediately started beating faster. "What's this?" "You'll figure it out." I opened it. A phone number. Her phone number. Underneath it she'd written, "Next time, ask me to dance first." I looked up. She was smiling. Not because of a dare. Not because her friends were watching. Not because anyone expected her to. Just because she wanted to. And in that moment, standing beside that window with a folded napkin in my hand, I had a feeling my life was about to become a lot more complicated. For once, I wasn't afraid of that at all. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. That never happened. For a few seconds, I just stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out why I felt different. Then I remembered the folded napkin sitting on my kitchen counter. I got out of bed and walked straight to it. The number was still there, which meant I hadn't imagined any of it. I made coffee, sat down at the table, and spent almost 15 minutes deciding what to text her. Too eager? Too casual? Too late? Too early? At one point I actually typed, "Good morning. Hope you survived the party." Then deleted it. Typed something else. Deleted that too. Finally, I gave up and sent the simplest message I could think of. "Good morning. I hope your friends paid you the $20. A minute passed. Then 2. Then 5. I told myself I didn't care, which was a lie. The phone buzzed. I grabbed it immediately. They paid me, but I think I got the better deal. I read the message 3 times, like an idiot, then smiled at my coffee cup. That exchange led to another, and another. By lunchtime, we'd already sent more messages than I'd exchanged with some people in an entire month. The strange thing was how natural it felt. There was no pressure, no awkward small talk, no pretending. It felt like continuing a conversation we'd started the night before. When Monday arrived, I walked into the office wondering if things would feel weird. They didn't. Well, not between Alyssa and me. Everyone else was another story. The moment I stepped off the elevator, Ethan appeared beside me. I swear he must have been waiting. "Tell me everything." I kept walking. "No. You disappeared for half the party." "No. You left with a smile on your face." "No. You got her number." That one made me stop. Ethan pointed dramatically. Aha! I hated how good he was at this. Before he could continue, another voice came from behind us. Good morning, Luke. I turned. Alyssa, holding a coffee, looking completely calm. Meanwhile, my heart nearly stopped. She smiled. Not a big smile. Just enough. The kind of smile that feels like a secret only two people understand. Then she handed me something. A small paper bag. What's this? Open it. Inside was a blueberry muffin. I looked up, confused. Alyssa shrugged. You mentioned Friday night that it's your favorite. I stared at her. Out of everything we talked about during that party, she'd remembered that? You bought me a muffin? She laughed. When you say it like that, it sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Then don't eat it. I immediately pulled it closer. She rolled her eyes, then headed toward the elevator. Before the doors closed, she looked back at me. By the way, what? You're buying coffee after work. The doors shut, and for the first time in years, I found myself looking forward to the end of the workday more than the weekend. By 5 o'clock, I had checked the clock at least 20 times. Maybe more. Not because I was bad at my job. Because my brain had completely abandoned any interest in spreadsheets around noon. Every time I focused on work, I remembered Alyssa standing by the elevator. Then the muffin. Then her smile. Then the fact that she'd basically invited herself to coffee. Not that I was complaining. At exactly 5:02 p.m., my phone buzzed. Are you always this slow leaving work? I laughed. She couldn't even see me. When you say it like that, it sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Then don't eat it. I immediately pulled it closer. She rolled her eyes, then headed toward the elevator. Before the doors closed, she looked back at me. By the way, what? You're buying coffee after work. The doors shut, and for the first time in years, I found myself looking forward to the end of the workday more than the weekend. By 5 o'clock, I had checked the clock at least 20 times. Maybe more. Not because I was bad at my job. Because my brain had completely abandoned any interest in spreadsheets around noon. Every time I focused on work, I remembered Alyssa standing by the elevator. Then the muffin. Then her smile. Then the fact that she'd basically invited herself to coffee. Not that I was complaining. At exactly 5:02 p.m., my phone buzzed. Are you always this slow leaving work? I laughed. She couldn't even see me. Yet somehow she'd guessed I was still sitting at my desk. I'm a responsible employee. Her reply came immediately. Liar. I shut down my computer. 5 minutes later, I stepped outside. Alyssa was leaning against a brick wall near the entrance. The late afternoon sunlight caught her hair as she looked down at her phone. For a second, she didn't notice me, and I found myself smiling, because this version of her was so different from the one everyone else saw. No audience, no coworkers, no pressure, just Alyssa. When she looked up and spotted me, her face brightened. That small reaction did something dangerous to my heart. About time. I had important work. You spent half the day staring at your screen. I stopped. How do you know that? She grinned. My office window faces your department. That's creepy. A little. We walked to a small coffee shop 3 blocks away. The kind of place that smelled permanently of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon. We found a table near the window. Outside, people hurried down the sidewalk. Inside, time seemed to slow down. Again. It happened every time I talked to her. 1 coffee became 2. Then dessert. Then another hour of conversation. At some point, Alyssa became unusually quiet. Not sad. Just thoughtful. What? She looked down at her cup. Then back at me. Can I ask something? Sure. Why haven't you dated anyone in so long? There it was. The question everyone eventually asked. Usually I dodged it. For some reason, I didn't want to dodge it with her. I leaned back, thinking. Honestly, she nodded. I got tired of feeling like I was competing. Trying to impress people. Trying to be funnier, smarter, more successful, more interesting. I shrugged. Eventually, it felt easier to stay single. Alyssa looked at me for a moment, longer than normal. Then she said something I didn't expect. That's sad. I laughed softly. Thanks. No, I mean it. She leaned forward. Do you know what I noticed about you the first week we met? I shook my head. You never try to impress anyone. I didn't know what to say, because nobody had ever described me that way before. Most people saw boring, quiet, forgettable, not whatever she was seeing. Alyssa looked out the window for a second, then smiled. My last boyfriend couldn't go 10 minutes without talking about himself. That explained a lot. How long were you together? Almost 3 years. I winced. She noticed. Yeah. That bad? Alyssa laughed. Let's just say the breakup was overdue. For the first time, I realized something. Neither of us was sitting there because we were lonely. Neither of us was trying to fill some empty space. We genuinely enjoyed being together. And somehow that felt more important than anything else. When we finally left the coffee shop, the sun had already disappeared. Streetlights glowed above us. The city felt quieter. We stopped near her car. Neither of us seemed ready to leave. Alyssa looked at me, then smiled. You know what's funny? What? 2 days ago, I thought asking you to dance was the most embarrassing thing I'd done all year. And now, her smile softened. Now I'm really glad my friends dared me. For a moment, neither of us moved. And for the first time since meeting her, I had the feeling that something much bigger than a simple office crush was beginning between us. The following week felt different. Not dramatic. Not like something out of a movie. Just better. For the first time in years, I didn't dread Monday mornings. Because every morning meant seeing Alyssa. Every lunch break became a possibility. Every notification made me check my phone. And somehow she had become part of my daily routine without either of us talking about it. Coffee after work became normal. Then dinner. Then long evening walks through the city. Neither of us ever officially called them dates. But nobody would have believed that. Especially not Ethan. By Thursday, he was already referring to Alyssa as my girlfriend. Alyssa found this hilarious. I found it annoying. Mostly because he wouldn't stop. One Friday evening, a group of coworkers decided to meet at a rooftop bar downtown. Normally, I would have skipped it. A month earlier, I definitely would have skipped it. But Alyssa was going. So suddenly it sounded like a fantastic idea. Funny how that works. The rooftop overlooked the city skyline. Music played softly through hidden speakers. People stood around small tables drinking cocktails and watching the sunset. I arrived a few minutes after Alyssa. The moment she saw me, she waved me over. That simple gesture made me feel stupidly happy. The evening started perfectly. Until someone mentioned relationships. The conversation drifted around the table. People shared stories. Bad dates. Exes. Embarrassing moments. Then one of Alyssa's friends asked a question. Alyssa, have you talked to Brian recently? The smile disappeared from Alyssa's face. Only for a second. But I noticed. Brian. The ex-boyfriend. The one she'd spent almost 3 years with. The one she'd barely talked about. Alyssa shook her head. No. Good. The friend took a sip of her drink. Because I saw him last weekend. I didn't know who Brian was. But judging by Alyssa's reaction, I didn't like him already. What happened? Someone asked. The friend rolled her eyes. He was asking about you. Alyssa looked away toward the city lights. The mood shifted. Not enough for anyone else to care. Enough for me to notice. The conversation moved on. But something stayed with me. For the rest of the night, Alyssa seemed distracted. Not unhappy, just somewhere else. Thinking. When the group finally started leaving, I walked her to her car. For a while, we stood there in silence. Then she surprised me. Do you ever feel like your past shows up right when you're finally moving forward? I looked at her. The city lights reflected in her eyes. And suddenly I knew this wasn't really about Brian. It was about fear. Fear that old mistakes would ruin something new. Fear that happiness wouldn't last. I took a breath, then answered honestly. Every single time. Alyssa smiled sadly, as if she'd been hoping I'd understand. And standing there beside her car, I realized our story was about to get more complicated than either of us expected. The drive home that night felt longer than usual. Not because of traffic. Because I couldn't stop thinking about what Alyssa had said. Most people talk about exes casually. Like they're old chapters in a book they've already finished reading. That wasn't how she talked about Brian. There was something unfinished there. Something she wasn't saying. I told myself not to overthink it. then spent the entire weekend overthinking it. Monday morning arrived. Alyssa seemed more like herself again. The smile was back. The jokes were back. And for a while I convinced myself I'd imagined everything. Then Tuesday happened. Around lunch, I got a text from her. "Can you meet me downstairs?" No smiley face. No joke. No explanation. Just that. A strange feeling immediately settled in my stomach. I took the elevator to the lobby. Alyssa was standing near the entrance, her arms crossed, phone in hand. She looked annoyed. No, not annoyed. Angry. I had never seen her angry before. What happened? Without saying a word, she handed me her phone. A text message filled the screen. I didn't know the number, but I knew exactly who had sent it. Brian. The message wasn't threatening. That almost made it worse. It said, "I heard you've been spending time with someone from work. We should talk." That was it. No insults. No accusations. Just those words. I handed the phone back. How did he know? Alyssa laughed bitterly. That's what I'd like to know. For a moment neither of us spoke. People walked past us. The city moved on as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I could see Alyssa fighting something inside her. Frustration. Anxiety. Maybe both. "Do you want to talk about it?" She stared at the floor, then nodded. We left the building and crossed the street to a small park. The air was cool. A few office workers sat on benches eating lunch. Alyssa remained quiet until we reached an empty one. Then she finally spoke. "When Brian and I broke up, it wasn't mutual." I listened. "He thought we'd get back together." "Did you?" "No." The answer came instantly, without hesitation. That told me everything. Alyssa looked out across the grass. "He kept calling for months." I felt my jaw tighten. "He showed up at my apartment twice." That tightened it further. "But eventually he stopped." She paused. "At least I thought he did." For the first time since we'd met, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not fear of Brian. Fear of history repeating itself. The smile was back. The jokes were back. And for a while I convinced myself I'd imagined everything. Then Tuesday happened. Around lunch, I got a text from her. "Can you meet me downstairs?" No smiley face. No joke. No explanation. Just that. A strange feeling immediately settled in my stomach. I took the elevator to the lobby. Alyssa was standing near the entrance, her arms crossed, phone in hand. She looked annoyed. No, not annoyed. Angry. I had never seen her angry before. What happened? Without saying a word, she handed me her phone. A text message filled the screen. I didn't know the number, but I knew exactly who had sent it. Brian. The message wasn't threatening. That almost made it worse. It said, "I heard you've been spending time with someone from work. We should talk." That was it. No insults. No accusations. Just those words. I handed the phone back. How did he know? Alyssa laughed bitterly. That's what I'd like to know. For a moment neither of us spoke. People walked past us. The city moved on as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I could see Alyssa fighting something inside her. Frustration. Anxiety. Maybe both. "Do you want to talk about it?" She stared at the floor, then nodded. We left the building and crossed the street to a small park. The air was cool. A few office workers sat on benches eating lunch. Alyssa remained quiet until we reached an empty one. Then she finally spoke. "When Brian and I broke up, it wasn't mutual." I listened. "He thought we'd get back together." "Did you?" "No." The answer came instantly, without hesitation. That told me everything. Alyssa looked out across the grass. "He kept calling for months." I felt my jaw tighten. "He showed up at my apartment twice." That tightened it further. "But eventually he stopped." She paused. "At least I thought he did." For the first time since we'd met, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not fear of Brian. Fear of history repeating itself. Fear that something she had worked hard to leave behind was finding its way back. And suddenly the situation felt a lot more serious than an awkward message from an ex-boyfriend. Alyssa took a deep breath, then looked directly at me. "I'm sorry." The apology caught me off guard. "For what?" "For bringing this into your life." I stared at her. honestly stunned. Because that wasn't what I was thinking at all. Not even close. The only thing I could think was how much I wanted to protect the woman sitting beside me. Even though we'd only known each other a few weeks. Even though none of this was my problem. Felt like my problem. Because it was happening to her. And somewhere along the way, Alyssa had become important to me. A lot more important than I was ready to admit. The next few days passed without another message from Brian. At least not that I knew of. Alyssa seemed lighter, more relaxed, and little by little things returned to normal. Or what had become normal for us. Coffee before work. Lunch together when our schedules matched. Texts throughout the day. The kind of messages that weren't important but somehow became important because of who sent them. One Thursday afternoon my phone buzzed while I was sitting in a meeting. Question. That was the entire message. I smiled immediately. A coworker noticed. I pretended to be reading something work-related. What's the question? Her reply came seconds later. Do you remember the first thing you thought about me? I nearly laughed out loud. Of all the questions she could ask, that was the one she chose. The meeting continued around me. I ignored most of it. Honestly, I hesitated. Then typed the truth. I thought you were way out of my league. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, good. I frowned. Good? Because I thought exactly the same thing about you. I stared at the screen, certain she was joking. Nice try. I'm serious. You expect me to believe that? Alyssa sent a laughing emoji. Then another message. Luke, do you know how intimidating you are when you first meet people? I almost dropped my phone. Me? Intimidating? Nobody had ever used that word to describe me. Ever. The absurdity of it stayed with me long after the meeting ended. Later that evening we met for dinner. A small Italian restaurant neither of us had visited before. Nothing fancy. The food was great. The company was better. At one point Alyssa excused herself to go to the restroom. I was checking my phone when a shadow appeared beside the table. I looked up. A man stood there. Mid-30s. Well-dressed. Confident. The kind of confidence that looked forced. His eyes moved toward the hallway Alyssa had disappeared into. Then back to me. You must be Luke. The smile instantly vanished from my face. I didn't need an introduction. I already knew. Brian. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. The noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away. Every instinct told me this wasn't a coincidence. Brian pulled out the empty chair across from me and sat down without being invited. I've heard a lot about you. I leaned back. I can't say the same. His smile returned, but there was nothing friendly about it. And for the first time since Alyssa entered my life, I realized the situation might become far more complicated than either of us had hoped. I studied him for a second. Brian looked exactly like the kind of guy I had imagined. Expensive watch. Perfect haircut. The confidence of someone who was used to getting what he wanted. Or taking it. What do you want? I asked. His smile widened slightly. Straight to the point. I've had a long day. He glanced toward the hallway again, making sure Alyssa hadn't returned. Then leaned forward. You're a nice guy, Luke. I already hated where this conversation was going. You don't know me. No, he shrugged. But I know her. There it was. The first warning shot. I kept my voice calm. What exactly are you trying to say? Brian folded his hands together. For a moment he looked almost sympathetic. Just be careful. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I genuinely couldn't believe this was happening. Careful of what? His eyes stayed fixed on mine. Alyssa has a habit of running when things become serious. The words hung between us. I didn't respond. Mostly because I knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted doubt. He wanted uncertainty. He wanted me to start questioning everything. Brian leaned back, satisfied he'd planted the seed. I thought you should know. Then he stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked away. The entire conversation had lasted less than 2 minutes. Yet somehow it felt much longer. A minute later Alyssa returned to the table. The moment she saw my face, she stopped. What happened? I considered lying, pretending everything was fine. But relationships don't survive on half-truths. So I told her. Every word. Every sentence. Every ridiculous thing Brian had said. The color immediately drained from her face. Then came anger. Real anger. He's unbelievable. People at nearby tables glanced over. Alyssa lowered her voice, but not her frustration. I swear to God, that man cannot stand the idea of not being in control. I reached across the table, placed my hand over hers. It was the first time I'd ever done that. The first time touching her felt completely natural. Alyssa, she looked at me. You don't have to explain yourself. Her expression softened slightly. Are you sure? I nodded. He's your ex. Luke. I don't care what he thinks. For a second she just stared at me. Then her fingers tightened around mine, and something changed. Not dramatically, not like fireworks. Felt quieter than that. More real, like two people silently deciding they were on the same side. The rest of dinner passed peacefully. But as I drove home later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about one thing. Not Brian. Not his warning. Not his attitude. Alyssa's reaction. Because she hadn't looked scared. She'd looked exhausted. Like she'd spent months carrying a burden she never wanted. And for the first time, I wondered how much of her past I still didn't know. The answer arrived the following evening. Completely unexpectedly. Alyssa called me. Not texted. Called. The moment I answered, I knew something was wrong. Her voice was shaking. Luke. My stomach dropped. Alyssa, what's happened? There was a long silence. Then she finally spoke. And what she said next changed everything I thought I knew about Brian. I stood up from my couch immediately. Alyssa, talk to me. For a few seconds, all I could hear was her breathing. Then she finally spoke. He's outside. My heart skipped a beat. What? Brian. I was already grabbing my keys. Where are you? At home. Is he trying to get in? No. Her voice trembled. He's just sitting in his car across the street. I froze. That somehow felt worse. Because it wasn't an accident. It wasn't coincidence. It was deliberate. How long? Almost an hour. I looked at the clock. It was nearly 10 at night. Have you called the police? No. Alyssa. I know. She sounded exhausted. Not scared. Not surprised. Just tired. Like someone who'd been dealing with the same problem for far too long. I'm coming over. Luke, you don't have to. I'm already leaving. I hung up before she could argue. The drive felt endless. Every red light made me angry. Every slow driver felt like an enemy. When I finally turned onto her street, I spotted the car immediately. Dark blue sedan. Parked across from her apartment building. The engine wasn't running. The lights were off. But someone was inside. I parked half a block away. Stepped out. And started walking. The closer I got, the more certain I became. Brian. He was looking toward Alyssa's building. Not his phone. Not the road. The building. Waiting. Watching. I stopped beside the driver's window. He looked up. The surprise on his face lasted only a second. Then the smile returned. That same smile. The one I'd seen at the restaurant. I hated it instantly. He lowered the window. Luke. What are you doing here? He shrugged. Thinking. I stared at him. Outside her apartment? Another shrug. You know this isn't normal, right? For the first time, the smile disappeared. Just slightly. Enough for me to see the irritation underneath. You think you know what's going on? No. I folded my arms. I think you're sitting outside your ex-girlfriend's apartment at 10 o'clock at night. Neither of us looked away. Cars passed. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The city continued around us. Brian finally sighed. Then looked toward Alyssa's building again. I loved her. The statement caught me off guard. Not because I doubted it. Because he sounded sincere. For a moment, genuinely sincere. I never stopped. I didn't answer. Because love wasn't the issue. His behavior was. Brian rubbed his face. Suddenly looking older than before. More tired. I thought she'd come back. There it was. The truth. Not anger. Not obsession. Hope. The kind of hope that refuses to die even when it should. And sometimes becomes dangerous because of it. You need to let her go. His eyes shifted back to me. The smile returned. But weaker this time. Maybe. Then he started the engine. For a second I thought he might argue. Fight. Do something stupid. Instead, he simply drove away. I stood there watching the taillights disappear into the darkness. Relieved, but not completely, because something about that conversation didn't feel finished. Not even close. And deep down, I had the uncomfortable feeling that Brian wasn't ready to disappear from our lives yet. The next week was quiet. Almost suspiciously quiet. No messages from Brian. No unexpected appearances. No drama. Part of me was relieved. The other part kept waiting for something to happen. Alyssa seemed relieved too. Little by little, the tension left her shoulders. The smile returned completely, and for a while, life felt normal again. One Saturday afternoon, she invited me to a small farmer's market near the lake. It wasn't exactly my idea of excitement, but spending time with Alyssa had a strange effect. Things I normally wouldn't care about suddenly sounded fun. We spent hours wandering between vendors, trying samples, laughing at ridiculous handmade decorations, arguing over which bakery sold the best cookies. At one point, Alyssa stopped at a stand selling flowers. She picked up a small bouquet of white daisies. Simple, nothing extravagant. For some reason, seeing her standing there with those flowers made my chest tighten. Not from anxiety, from something much more dangerous. The realization that I was falling in love with her. Really falling. Not a crush. Not excitement. Not infatuation. Love. The kind that sneaks up on you while you're busy paying attention to everything else. The realization stayed with me for the rest of the day. And terrified me. Because loving someone means giving them the ability to hurt you. That was the part nobody talks about. The following Friday, everything changed again. It started with a company announcement. A major promotion opportunity had opened. A department manager position. A big step up. More responsibility. Much better pay. Everyone was talking about it. Including Alyssa. Because she was one of the strongest candidates. And honestly, she deserved it. More than anyone. That afternoon we met for lunch. She seemed excited. Nervous. Hopeful. What if I actually get it? I smiled. Then they'll finally have someone competent running that department. She laughed. Careful. People will think you like me. I looked at her, maybe a second too long, because something changed in her expression. The joking disappeared. The laughter faded. For a brief moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us suddenly felt different. Heavier. More honest. Alyssa looked down, then back up. Luke. Before she could continue, her phone rang. The timing couldn't have been worse. She checked the screen, and immediately frowned. My stomach tightened. I already knew. Brian. She silenced the call. A few seconds later, another call came. Then another. Then another. The smile vanished from her face. And for the first time since that night outside her apartment, genuine fear returned to her eyes. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And neither of us knew yet how much damage Brian was about to cause. The first call was easy to ignore. The second was annoying. By the fifth call, even I was getting angry. Alyssa stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered over the decline button. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. Same number. Same name. Brian. People around us continued eating lunch, talking, laughing, completely unaware of the storm building at our table. Block him. Alyssa shook her head. I already have. What? He keeps using different numbers. That wasn't normal. Not even close. A bad feeling settled in my stomach. The kind you get when something suddenly becomes much bigger than you realized. The phone finally stopped. For almost 10 minutes there was silence. Then a text arrived. Alyssa looked at the screen. Her face went pale. Immediately, I had never seen someone's expression change so quickly. What? She didn't answer. Alyssa. Slowly, she handed me the phone. The message was short. Very short. You replaced me faster than I expected. That was all. No threat. No insult. No explanation. Yet somehow it felt threatening anyway. Because it meant he was watching. Watching enough to know she was spending time with me. Watching enough to know she wasn't alone anymore. I handed the phone back. Okay. Alyssa looked at me. What? This has gone far enough. She looked away. I could tell what she was thinking. Trying not to make it a bigger problem. Trying not to cause trouble. trying to handle everything herself. The same thing she'd probably been doing for months, maybe years. Luke. No. For once I interrupted her. You shouldn't have to live like this. The words came out harsher than I intended. But I meant every one of them. Alyssa remained quiet, then nodded. Very slightly. The conversation ended there. But neither of us forgot it. That evening she called me again. This time her voice sounded calmer. Tired, but calmer. We talked for almost an hour. About everything except Brian. Work, movies, travel, random childhood memories. Eventually the conversation slowed. Neither of us seemed eager to hang up. Then Alyssa said something unexpected. Can I tell you something? Always. A few seconds passed. Long enough to make me curious. Then nervous. Then both. When we first met. She laughed softly. I thought you didn't like me. I nearly choked. What? I'm serious. Why? Because every time I walked into a room, you'd look away. I couldn't help laughing. The misunderstanding was so ridiculous. Alyssa. What? I looked away because I liked you. Silence. Complete silence. Then a very quiet, oh. I smiled despite myself. I spent months convincing myself you barely knew I existed. Another pause. Then I heard her laughing. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just genuinely. And somehow that sound made me happier than it should have. When the laughter faded, neither of us spoke. For several seconds we simply listened to each other's breathing. Then Alyssa whispered something. So quietly I almost missed it. I'm really glad I asked you to dance. My heart nearly stopped. The strange thing was that I knew exactly what she meant. Because if she hadn't walked across that ballroom, if her friends hadn't dared her, if she'd decided not to do it, none of this would have happened. There would have been no coffee, no dinners, no late-night phone calls, no us. And for the first time, I realized I couldn't imagine my life without her in it anymore. A few days later, Alyssa got the promotion. I found out before she told me. Not because she wasn't going to. Because Ethan ran into my office looking like he'd just won the lottery. She got it. I looked up from my computer. What? Alyssa. The grin on his face widened. She got the manager position. I stood immediately. Without thinking. Without planning. I just stood. Ethan pointed at me. There it is. What? That stupid smile. I didn't even realize I was smiling. Alyssa texted me 20 minutes later. Meet me after work? Of course. I have news. I know. 3 dots appeared. Ethan? Ethan. I hate him. Everybody does. That evening we met at our usual coffee shop. The moment she walked through the door, I could see it. The excitement. The relief. The pride. She looked happy. Really happy. I wrapped my arms around her before I even thought about it. For half a second I worried I'd crossed a line. Then she hugged me back. Tightly. Neither of us let go right away. When we finally pulled apart, she laughed. I got it. I know. You know? Your biggest fan told me. She rolled her eyes. Ethan. Ethan. We sat down. Alyssa talked for almost 20 minutes. About the interview. About the responsibility. About the opportunities. I loved watching her talk when she was excited. Her entire face changed. Her eyes lit up. She spoke faster. Used her hands more. It was impossible not to smile. Then something happened. Alyssa stopped talking. Not because she ran out of things to say. Because she was looking at me. Just looking. What? She shook her head. Nothing. I knew that was a lie. What? A small smile appeared. I like that you always look proud of me. The words hit harder than she probably intended. Because she was right. I was proud of her. More than I should have been. More than made sense. For a moment neither of us looked away. And suddenly the noise of the coffee shop disappeared again. Just like it had that first night at the company party. Then Alyssa quietly asked, Can I tell you something else? I nodded. Her fingers traced the edge of her coffee cup. I almost didn't ask you to dance. I laughed. Good thing you did. No. She smiled softly. You don't understand. Her eyes met mine. My friends were joking. I know. I almost stayed at the table. The smile slowly faded from my face. Because suddenly I realized how small that moment had been. One decision. One walk across a ballroom. One question. And our entire story could have never happened. Alyssa looked down for a second, then back at me. And honestly, her voice grew quieter. I think it would have been the biggest mistake of my life. For the first time since we'd met, I couldn't think of a clever response. Couldn't think of a joke. Couldn't think of anything at all. Because the truth was, I felt exactly the same way. For a while, neither of us said anything. The words hung between us. Not awkwardly. Not heavily. Just honestly. The kind of honesty that's impossible to take back once it's spoken. Alyssa looked down at her coffee. I looked out the window, both of us pretending we weren't thinking the exact same thing. Then my phone buzzed. The timing couldn't have been worse. Ethan. Of course. I ignored it. Alyssa laughed. Let me guess. Ethan. He has incredible timing. The worst. The moment passed. Not disappeared. Just drifted into the background. But something had changed. Neither of us could pretend anymore. The feelings were there. Out in the open. Unspoken. Yet obvious. The following week became one of the happiest periods of my life. And that should have scared me. Because every time life feels perfect, part of you starts waiting for something to go wrong. I ignored that feeling. At least I tried to. Then Friday arrived. The day everything finally exploded. I was finishing paperwork when my office phone rang. Reception. Luke. Yeah. There's someone here asking for Alyssa. I frowned. Okay. The receptionist hesitated, then lowered her voice. He won't leave. My stomach tightened instantly. Who is it? Another pause. Then, he says his name is Brian. I stood up so fast my chair nearly fell over. The elevator ride felt endless. By the time I reached the lobby, several people were already watching. Brian stood near the reception desk, hands in his pockets, calm, almost relaxed, like he belonged there, like none of this was strange. Alyssa was standing 10 feet away, furious, embarrassed, humiliated. The moment she saw me, relief flashed across her face, only briefly, then it disappeared. Brian noticed too. His eyes shifted toward me, and he smiled. I was beginning to hate that smile more every day. You need to leave. My voice came out colder than I expected. Brian shrugged. I just wanted to talk. Alyssa laughed. A short, angry laugh. You've been trying to talk. For almost a year. Several employees nearby suddenly became very interested in their phones. Nobody wanted to look. Everyone was looking. Brian's expression hardened. For the first time, the calm mask cracked. Alyssa, I'm trying to fix this. There is no this to fix. The lobby became completely silent. Even the receptionist stopped pretending to work. Brian looked at her, then at me, then back at her again, and finally asked the question that should have been asked months ago. Is this really about him? Alyssa didn't hesitate. Not for a second. Not for a heartbeat. Partly. Brian froze. So did I. But Alyssa wasn't finished. Her eyes never left his. The bigger reason is that I was unhappy long before Luke came into my life. Every word hit him harder than the last. I could see it. The realization. The acceptance he had spent months avoiding. The understanding that this wasn't about losing a competition. It wasn't about me. He had already lost her long before I ever met her. And for the first time since this whole mess began, Brian looked defeated. Truly defeated. Not angry. Not bitter. Just tired. The fight had finally left him. And standing there in that crowded lobby, I had a feeling we were witnessing the end of something that should have ended a long time ago. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Not Brian. Not Alyssa. Not me. The entire lobby seemed frozen. Brian looked at the floor, then at Alyssa, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked like a man who had finally run out of arguments. You really mean that? It wasn't a question. Alyssa nodded. Slowly. I do. Brian swallowed hard. The fight disappeared from his eyes. The anger too. All that remained was disappointment. Not in her. In reality. Because reality was finally refusing to bend to what he wanted. After a long silence, he let out a tired laugh. The kind people make when they realize they've already lost. I guess I kept hoping. Alyssa's expression softened. Not because she wanted him back, because she was kind. Even now, even after everything. I know. Brian looked around the lobby, at the people pretending not to watch, at me, then back at Alyssa, and finally gave a small nod. The first genuine thing I'd ever seen from him. I'm sorry. The words surprised everyone, including him. Alyssa looked shocked. So was I. Brian rubbed the back of his neck. I should have let this go a long time ago. Nobody answered. There wasn't really anything to say. A minute later he turned toward the doors, walked outside, and disappeared. Just like that. No dramatic ending. No fight. No screaming. Just a man finally accepting something he should have accepted months ago. The lobby remained silent for another few moments. Then life slowly returned. People went back to work. Conversations resumed. Phones came back out. The world moved on. Alyssa stood completely still, looking toward the doors, as if she couldn't believe it was finally over. I walked over, carefully. Hey! She looked at me, and suddenly her eyes filled with tears. Not sad tears. Relief. The kind that builds for months, then arrives all at once, without warning. Before I could say anything, she wrapped her arms around me. Right there in the middle of the lobby. I hugged her back. Neither of us cared who was watching anymore. Especially not Ethan, who was definitely watching. Probably from 3 different angles. Alyssa laughed through her tears, then buried her face against my shoulder. I can't believe it's finally over. I closed my eyes. Neither could I. For the first time since we'd met, there was no shadow hanging over us. No unfinished chapter. No ghost from the past. Just us. And for the first time, the future felt completely open. A week later, I took Alyssa back to the same hotel where everything had started. The same ballroom. The same dance floor. The company was hosting another event. Smaller this time. Nothing special. At least that was what I told her. As we walked inside, she immediately recognized the room. A smile appeared. Oh no. What? I know that look. I laughed. What look? The one that means you're planning something. She wasn't wrong. Not even a little. Because hidden inside my jacket pocket was a small velvet box. And by the end of the night, I was planning to ask the most important question of my life. The entire evening, I barely heard a word anyone said. People talked. Music played. Glasses clinked. The event carried on around me, but my attention kept drifting back to the small velvet box in my pocket. I had checked it at least 20 times. Maybe 30. At one point Alyssa caught me touching my jacket. What are you doing? Nothing. That was suspicious. I don't know what you're talking about. She narrowed her eyes, then laughed, and somehow that made me even more nervous. The funny thing is, I wasn't worried she'd say no. Not really. I knew how she felt, and she knew how I felt. The fear came from something else. The realization that one question could divide your life into 2 parts. Before and after. The evening moved quickly, almost too quickly. Then the music changed. A slow song. Not the same one from that first night, but close enough. Alyssa smiled. Want to dance? I laughed. Again. Again. We walked onto the dance floor, just like before, except nothing was the same anymore. The first time we'd stood there as strangers. Now she knew my fears, my habits, my terrible taste in movies, my coffee order, the way I got quiet when I was worried. And I knew hers. The dance started slowly. For a while neither of us spoke. We simply moved with the music. Comfortable, happy, together. Then Alyssa rested her head lightly against my shoulder. And suddenly every nervous thought disappeared. Because in that moment, everything felt right. Completely right. I looked around the ballroom, at the lights, the tables, the crowd, then back at Alyssa, and realized there would never be a more perfect moment. Not for me, not for us. I stopped dancing. She looked up, confused. Luke! My heart was beating so hard I was sure she could hear it. Slowly, I reached into my jacket. The moment she saw the velvet box, her eyes widened, then covered her mouth. Oh my God! Around us, people began noticing. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. But I barely saw any of them, because all I could see was her. The woman who had changed my life because of a stupid $20 dare. The woman who had become my best friend. My favorite person. My home. I took a breath, then dropped to one knee. The entire room erupted. Cheers. Gasps. Applause. I heard none of it, because Alyssa was already crying. And honestly, so was I. Alyssa Cooper. My voice shook. I didn't care. 3 years ago, you walked across this room and asked me to dance. A tear rolled down her cheek. I smiled. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. The ballroom had become completely silent. Everyone waiting, watching. I opened the box. The ring sparkled under the lights. And for the first time in my life, I was absolutely certain about something. Will you marry me? Alyssa didn't answer immediately. Not because she was thinking, because she was crying too hard to speak. Finally, she laughed through her tears, nodded once, then again, and again. Yes. The room exploded. Applause. Cheering. People standing. Somebody whistled. Someone else shouted they were crying. I didn't care about any of them, because a second later Alyssa threw her arms around me. And the only thing I could think was how close we had come to never meeting at all. One dare. One dance. One choice. That was all it took. Sometimes people ask when my life changed. They expect some dramatic answer. A major event. Turning point. But the truth is much simpler. My life changed the moment a beautiful woman walked across a ballroom floor and asked me to dance as a joke. Neither of us saw it coming. And honestly, I'm glad we didn't.